conversation this morning reminded me of an old blog post that I made some years ago. It was the story of a perfectly ordinary day in the working life in a hospital, and it's an incident that I experienced firsthand. Anyone that's worked in hospitals will be familiar with the dogma, the nonsense, the policies and the procedures that have no common sense value to them whatsoever. But there are the custodians of policy and dogma within every organisation, and they maintain them at all costs. One of the things we used to say is that if management could get rid of all these goddamn patients, we could run the hospital perfectly as they wanted us to do. The patients were just a massive inconvenience to a very well-run system. Here is the story of an ordinary day in my life when I worked at the hospital. I shall read the blog post in its entirety. Just thought I'd share a strange story. There's no moral, there's no punchline, and it isn't particularly amusing. Just a strange thing that I experienced one day. Some readers may already know, but I used to get myself in quite a lot of trouble by refusing to blindly accept things, and also by asking far too many questions. As a result, my natural need to take a pragmatic approach to life used to get me in all sorts of bother when I worked at the hospital. One afternoon, I was responsible for admitting to the unit the patients that were on the operations list the following day. Basically, the patients come in the day before so that all the routines can be fulfilled, the paperwork completed, and various medical observations performed and so on. The aim was that the following day, the surgical lists would be assured to run smoothly and without any hiccup. So, for patients arriving, this can all be very boring, as there's little for them to do apart from waiting about. And there's lots and lots of waiting about. On this particular afternoon, we only had one patient for admission, and he was fortunate enough to get the 4-bedded bay all to himself. Now, each bed is numbered. Each patient is assigned to a numbered bed. The bed chart is completed and then forwarded to various managers, one of whom is the bed manager, who is responsible for overall bed allocations within the hospital. So, sat with the patient by his bed, as it starts to get dark outside, I'm filling in his paperwork with him. Switching on the bedside light so that I can see better, I discover the light doesn't work. The bulb's blown. Now, procedures state that I must fill in a form for the Estates and Maintenance Department. This form is then countersigned by my manager and enters into the system. Weeks later, somebody appears with a bulb that doesn't fit and says he'll be back later. More weeks pass and eventually a man with the correct bulb appears on the ward, but no one can remember where it's supposed to go because it was all so long ago and now the original paperwork's gone missing. So I decide against this nonsense and simply switch the bulbs with the empty bed opposite. I intend to leave a note for the night staff so they can fill in the form and thus fulfill the policies, and my patient can read his book in bed that evening. But disaster happens. I'm seen changing the bulbs by the unit's jobsworth. Every unit has one. She starts lecturing me about policy, job descriptions, and most of all, health and safety, and how I won't be covered if anything happened to me when I change the bulb. Apparently I'm going to be reported. And that's when it happened. She told me to switch the bulbs back to the way they were before you messed with them. I paused for breath before saying that this was against policy because there were health and safety implications for messing with light bulbs, and I'm not covered if I touch them. After all, that's what she's just lectured me about. Do as you're told, she commands. But I am, I respond. And she marches off, presumably to get reinforcements. The patient attempted to offer a resolution. Why don't I just switch to that bed over there, as he picked up his stuff to move over? But of course, that bed didn't have a working bulb because I've just switched them. Just switch them back like she said the patient. And just as I was about to, you guessed it, back came Jobsworth with her reinforcements and commanded that I cease and desist immediately and go and wait in the office. The patient was told he could not switch beds because of the allocations had already been made, and he was ordered back to his original bed. As he did this, she switched the bulbs back, so he was back in his original bed with the broken bulb. Order has been restored, and there you have it, a perfectly ordinary day working in a hospital.
This is